Thank you so much for just saying yes, because I did ask you to come here, so thank you.
Thanks for the invitation. So your work just touches on, or not even touches on, just deals with, I guess, so many similar themes to many of those that my work deals with as well. So
Absolutely.
I see lots of really obvious parallels.
Yeah.
As well as some distinct differences that I want to...
Okay.
You've got the whole added dimension of Britishness.
Yes.
Which I don't kind of grapple with in terms of I've been here for fucking years.
I know.
But I also swear though, so do you know what, I'm not going to apologise. It's just cultural.
It's going to be a lot of swearing.
But yeah, so I feel like my identity is very complicated, and I'm grappling with all these different levels of complexity, but I don't have to actually add Britishness on top. I can be oh well, I'm Irish, and that's white, but it's colonized and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd just like to start with asking you about because the Britishness is really pronounced in the work as well, and I know you're interrogating it and problematizing it, but I just want to know more.
I think I just never knew what it was ever, and I it wasn't that I had it rammed down my
what is
throat.
it?
Yeah, exactly. What is it? And that's, I guess, what my whole practice is about, constantly asking what that is. And when people talk to me about literally the sentence you just said, I'm why do you do that? I don't know. It just obviously is something that is not figured out.
I'm not asking why.
No,
it totally makes sense.
No, but I'm asking myself why.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's just, my whole practice. I think any art practice is really just solving a problem or attempting to solve a type of problem that actually doesn't have an end. There's no end point. So it's kind of this constant chasing of finding different things along the way. And it's been nice. It's been nice and not nice to understand Britishness. I think also I'm only understanding a certain type of Britishness, but I think that mostly I don't know what it is. I'm not really actually looking for what it is because I don't want to define it. And actually, I think mostly I'm just recognizing that I'm at the end of it. I'm at the start of it and I'm at the end of it. So it's just this in-between thing, which is why I got, Born British, Die British tattooed on my fucking back.
That's quite a statement.
Yes, it is. My mum loves it.
When you say you're at the start of it and you're at the end of it, what do you mean by that?
I think that's what I mean. It's you're birthed into this thing that's awaiting you that is Britishness, but you're not that. So then I spend my life not being that. But then when I die, am I that? It will be on my death certificate and it's on my birth certificate. So it's the in-between, and that's what I enjoy. Not even figuring out, just existing in, and I guess fucking up, or just being our version of an existence of Britishness. But yeah, I mean, I don't understand it at all myself. So it's you probably don't understand a lot of the facets of your identity. But I think that the best thing, and I always feel so privileged in my unprivilegedness, because it means that I just get to fuck around and see what happens.
And do you feel I often feel when you are intimately embedded in something and yet you still occupy this liminal position, within that, it gives you particular insights into the thing that somebody that doesn't have the liminality often can't see.
Yeah.
So maybe you understand more about the thing.
I think so.
People that don't.
Yeah,
the same way.
exactly. It's I was brought up predominantly by the white side of my family, who are not so well versed in bringing up black children. Let's say
very diplomatic.
No shade, because how would they be?
Yeah. I feel the same.
It has been such a learning experience for them, but as they've been learning, I've been learning and I've been experiencing. And so I just have this like blessed view of everything. Like, I know why you act like that way. I know why my mum will say a certain thing. I know why my dad will say a certain thing, and I can see it all as this one big, like, gorgeous country. And I think that's it. It's not, when I talk about Britishness, I fuck the fucking island, you know, fuck all of that, fuck it up. My Britishness is my bungalow at 12 Ivy Grove, Gunthorpe, Peterborough, you know, that's the Britishness that I know and understand, and that's actually quite a queering of Britishness that I think we know, even though perhaps my, you know, family would question why I say that, but I'm like, yeah, no, dude, you're like going against it without it, but you know, just because of love.
And is Peterborough where you grew up?
Yes, it is.
And so yeah, it's so like it's such a central character in your work.
In this show,
the presence of Peterborough is like, you know, really pronounced. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like growing up there and your relationship to the city?
I can't really remember growing up like there.
Not that long ago. Just I blocked it out.
Yeah. I mean, like, no, I can't. It was just life. It's just life, you know. And it's not deep. It isn't deep, you know. The world is the way that it is. Society is the way that it is. It's pretty similar everywhere. But one thing that I did feel when I was making this show was, how dare I think that I'm better than that place? You know, how dare I? Because my whole family lives there.
Yeah.
How dare I move to London and think I can see you for who you are? And this show was about giving credit to the people whose lives are going on living there, you know? Like, it's this idea of the small town that you kind of think you're bigger than, or that there's more out there. But I was speaking to another black kid from Peterborough the other day, Harrison, who's also mixed race, but we were both saying, like, we felt the most free when we were in that place because everything was up for grabs. We had nothing exciting. So our imaginations were like, whoa. And actually we both enjoy going home and sleeping in like our mum's houses and being like, having that kind of like boredom. And boredom is sick. Like boredom is so good. You're not bored in London, and actually you're not bored, but you're annoyed.
And you're jaded.
And you're like,
oh
yeah, shall I go to the V&A today? Maybe. I don't know. You know, in Peterborough, it's like, oh, you're gonna like maybe go to a field and smoke a bit of weed and get fingered, like behind the bus shells. I don't know. Which is great, actually. But boredom is amazing, and I'm grateful for boredom. And actually, boredom is the wrong word, because when you see the show, you realize that there's nothing boring about these people's lives. And actually, it is, I think, yeah, just going back to that how dare I moment and remembering, don't fucking think you're better than anybody.
But when you leave
Yeah.
and you come to London
Yeah.
and you know you're in the art world and everything, and you go back, do people kind of like look at you with suspicion or expect, like, think that you think that like you're
I don't.
better? Is there that kind of attitude? I remember when I first moved to England, like I went home like a week later.
Yeah, and everyone's like,
Everyone's
you're
just like, everyone's just like, oh, the head and her, big English accent on her. And I was just like, no, I've been gone for a week, like, I don't have an English accent. My accent is slightly anglicised now for 20-something years, but it certainly wasn't like after a week. I was just like, stop it.
I think there's a bit of that, but it's funny. You know, I come from a very humorous, like, family. And no, I've been very humbled immediately. I'm exactly, you know, I wouldn't dare, because I truly am like of them, you know, and I wouldn't be in London if it wasn't for them, especially my mum, and yeah, especially my dad. So I think that, not really, I think that mostly I'm more in awe of them, because I'm like, you're cozy as, you know how to drive. I don't know how to drive.
I don't know how to drive.
Right? You know, and it's cozy and everyone lives so close together. And it's like I did a zine that's like kind of attached to the show called Faith and How to Keep It. And it's just like little writings. But one of the writings is like, Peterborough was never for me. And I knew that. but I really love the sounds of like the gravel when a car rolls up on my mum's, lawn, and it's just an auntie who's like, "You're right," and then just like comes in for no reason. And I'm like, that's not what we have in London. Everything's very planned. And I miss the spontaneity, and I'm grateful for the spontaneity of Peterborough. I think, again, not boredom. Boredom is a gross word, actually. I shouldn't say that, because they ain't bored. They're chilling. But they're happy. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, it also like works in terms of thinking about diaspora as well, I think, just like a hopping from place to place and not really knowing, and knowing that you're like not comfortable here, it doesn't mean that you're better than it. Or it's just like, I think it was Fran Lebowitz who said, like, she remembers being like, this place is not for me. It's not better than me, I'm not better than it, but it's not for me. And that's how I feel about Peterborough.
Yeah. I also remember thinking places were not for me. Well, specifically Dublin was not for me.
Yeah.
And like the longer I'm away from it, and actually like the more it changes, I'm like, oh God, maybe it's the only place.
But that
for
must
me.
be strange with your accent though, because that's such a like, it pins you down to where, like, I feel like I have a bit more of like agency, and like people think I'm from London sometimes, and
I don't know that like people don't necessarily like read me as Irish, like even. Okay, so in England, no, I know it's mad, right? But even in this country, no, actually, what am I saying? Even in this country, particularly in this country, people really struggle with me being Irish. So even though they can hear I have like an accent, they'll just think it's from a part of England that's not London.
Is that because you're black?
I think it might be.
Yeah.
I think that might be something to do with it. Or I'm also, this doesn't happen as much as it being like a far-flung or rural part of England.
Yeah.
But I also do get the Caribbean quite, like I've had quite a few people being like, oh, like, so when did you move from Jamaica? And I'm like, well, I've actually never been to Jamaica.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you talking about? So people will like, see me as kind of so rare that anybody gets Irish. I get American a lot as well. Yeah. But people, know that I have some kind of accent, but they don't necessarily like read it as Irish.
But you were originally, you were born in America.
No, that was a law in Wikipedia that's been changed.
We went on your Wikipedia today. I was stalking you and I was like, oh.
Do you know what? Maybe it's back there, because don't believe anything that you read on Wikipedia. There's so much like madness on there. It's for a while ago it said I was born in America, and then we had it changed. And now it's maybe
oh my
back.
God, that was probably just someone thinking that you were American.
No. Yeah, exactly. So I was just like, it's not that big of a deal. Only that like people are always trying to like say I'm other things. I'm just like, I'm not actually American. But I moved to America when I was a small baby.
Okay.
I was born in Ireland.
Okay. Yeah. Do you consider yourself Irish?
Yeah, like 100%.
That was totally a line from This Is England then. There's this line in This Is England when he's like, do you consider yourself Jamaican or England? And it's like this really tense moment. And he's like, English. And they're all like, yeah.
Okay. But the thing is, like, I consider myself many different
exactly.
things. And I don't consider myself half of anything. Like, everything
that
I am, I'm like, wholly that thing.
I have a quote that I wrote down when I was looking in your book today that I thought was really interesting. Actually, no, this was a tweet. A very fucking great tweet. One. Yeah, a spicy one. You posted it on Instagram though, so I was like, okay, she's comfortable with this tweet. She's happy with this tweet.
Anything that I posted, I'm happy with. Okay. Like, I just tweet them, especially on Twitter, because it's like a cesspit on there. So I just tweet, and it's like a detonation.
Dude, I don't have Twitter.
Like,
that's too scary. No. Okay, so for the record, the racial category mixed race is not one I am very familiar with growing up. It is not a fixed geographical or historical consistent category. No race is. It has little utility for me and is not one that I tend to use personally as a Black Irish woman. And that for me is like, whoa, because I was never allowed to call myself Black growing up.
Really?
Ever.
By who?
My mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I asked her about this later on, and she said, because it denies every part of me that's in you. And I thought, okay. I just, I can understand why she would feel that way, especially because of the way that the involvement that my dad's had in my life, let's say that. But in terms of being, so So I've always been like, okay, I'm mixed race and I have to tell everyone that I'm mixed race and that I'm not black because, you know, and that was really pushed into me until I was about 18.
Yeah.
And I think it was Maggie, actually, sorry, Maggie. I think I said to Maggie said something about me being black and I said, I'm not black, you know. I'm only like 1/4 black. And Maggie was like, dude, you're black. And I was like, what? I knew I was black. I always knew I was black. But to have you have kind of the opposite experience of not hearing the word mixed race or not having that as a what did you say? Utility, yeah. How did that feel?
I mean,
let me rephrase my question.
No,
that wasn't really a question.
No,
What
I
I'm
can
saying
totally
is,
answer.
did mixed race come after being called black as a kid?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Honestly, mixed race wasn't really a thing. Like, so I'm like way older than you.
You are not.
No, I really am. I think I'm probably old enough to your mother. I would have been a young mother, but so I was growing up. I was a child in Ireland in the 80s, and there were. It was this kind of like. Irish people that are here, I'm sure can verify this. It was like kind of like a 99.9% white like environment, you know. There were no non-white communities. There were some people who weren't white, like myself, but we were just like kind of like isolated anomalies. Do you know what I mean? Like it was really unusual. And I was like the first black person that lots of people met. And I know that because people would tell me all the time, oh, I've never met a black person before. You're the first black person I've ever met. So they weren't really like distinguishing. They were just like, in that context that is like so white. Yeah. It's just, you're black. Yeah. Right? Kind of, there's no mixed race. Yeah. And to the point where even people would see my mum and they'd be like, oh, right, you're adopted. Okay. And I'd be like, no, like I have a white mother. Yeah. Like, look how pale my skin is. Yeah. But no, people would be like, how does that work? Yeah, I don't actually know how to explain the genetics of this. I'm just like, so a penis goes into a vagina. I don't go on saying that in the 80s in Dublin.
Well, that's so interesting, I think.
But then just very quickly to continue on that. So then I went to America and I was really little. So I don't really know what it was like when I was little, but we went back to Ireland. Loads of my family stayed in America. They were all black. They were the Nigerian side of my family. And they all married like black Americans. So that's just an entirely black side of my family. So I'd go and stay with them in the summers as a teenager. And there was no mixed race there either. There was like light-skinned black, and there was like dark-skinned black, and there were lots of other complexions. But everybody was black. There was no... If I had been like, actually, I'm not black, I'm mixed race. Yeah. That would have been really viewed with suspicion. Yeah. Like, oh, why are you trying to separate yourself? Yeah. Why are you trying to say you're something different? Because obviously in America, there's black people of all different complexions. Yeah. Who aren't mixed. Well, obviously they're intergenerationally mixed, but they don't have like a white parent. Yeah. And lots of them look like me. So if I was to kind of say I was mixed race, that would be, you know, viewed with... But it's different in different contexts. Like in London at the moment now, there's like an insistence that you identify as mixed race. Yeah. That's very different to what I experienced in America, and very different to what I experienced like growing up. Yeah. You know? So it's not consistent. It's different in different geographical spaces with different histories. Yeah. Like race shifts, racial classifications are different in different contexts, in different historical periods as well.
Yeah, I think it's just like I'm still on a journey of unlearning what I have. And, you know, let's call it what it was racism in the home. Unlearning that and being like a black person out in the world and being treated like a fucking black person, regardless of the skin tone. But obviously we are moving on to like really great conversations about like colorism and all of that stuff now. So it's still like, where do you place yourself, you know? And I get the answer is you don't place yourself anywhere. You're just a body. You're already placed. But yeah, I have another thing that I wanted to ask you about. Guys, I asked Emma here, by the way, so I'm sorry that you're all just watching this happen. But So
Thank you so much.
this was the most amazing thing that I read from Don't Touch My Hair, which if anyone hasn't read is incredible. Dude, was that like 2016?
I think I started in 2016, but it came out in like 2019.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Time. So you
2018
said,
maybe.
which is like what was making me think about my dad's situation in the film, was proximity to whiteness without the protection that whiteness brought could be nothing less than deadly. And I think that, sorry if you haven't seen the film, also not sorry, you should have seen the film. With my dad's story, I think that hits because he had such proximity to whiteness, but no protection
And
at
so
all.
like I watched the film,
Yeah.
and so he was like, you know, being abused.
Yeah, by
Yeah.
a white woman who
Yeah.
loved black babies. You know, reading that quote and thinking more about because obviously I could only put so much into that film, but that for me was the biggest thing, that this proximity to whiteness was deadly. And it doesn't matter, I'm not saying that someone has to die for it to be deadly, but my dad has not lived a life.
Yeah.
He has not lived a life.
Yeah.
He's survived now, just now, I would say, just now. But he has so much proximity to whiteness.
Have you seen the film? It's just like a Guardian film about the mixed race children in the industrial schools in Ireland.
Not in Ireland, no. But I love those kind of things that are like on YouTube and stuff. That kind of
Yeah.
vibe. No, I haven't. I have another question for you
Yeah.
that maps onto that.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if Patricia, my dad's mum, who was from Dublin, everybody.
Oh, she was from Dublin?
Yes.
Yeah.
You from Dublin?
I'm from Dublin.
Yeah. It's kind of a small place, I'm learning,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah.
And you're from Dublin? Yep. So, yeah, for context for people who haven't seen the film, it starts off with my dad's mother giving birth to him out of wedlock. She was white Irish Catholic, and she was about 16 to 19, we're not so sure. And then because she couldn't marry and it was complicated and blah, 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 and he was a black child, she went off to Ireland and left my dad in London, which he eventually landed in Peterborough. But my question to you is, if she had taken him in 1962 back to Ireland, do you think his life would have been any better?
That's such a brilliant question.
Yeah.
1962. Jesus. Okay. So I have to just reiterate, there were very, very few black people
Yeah.
in Ireland, right? This is before there was the kind of the migration there that happened in the late 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's like, you know, a whole generation of like black and brown Irish people. But this is only very recently the case. So it's just like, you know, sporadic. There were a few, mostly African students and mostly Nigerian and Ghanaian students who went over. They went to Trinity and they went to the Royal College of Surgeons. And quite a few of them, and they usually went over like as single men. There weren't many black women there. There weren't many black people at all, but there particularly weren't many black women. It was almost like universally men. So quite a few of those men had children with Irish women, and most of those children ended up in industrial schools or in like care homes. And when I was growing up, if I met a mixed race person that was any older than me, 9 times out of 10, they'd been adopted or grown up in an orphanage or in care. And care. Literally.
I know, that word care.
It's like the antithesis. Literally the only example I can think of is Phil Lynott. Phil Lynott. His name's actually Phil Lynott, but the lead singer of Thin Lizzy.
Really?
Yeah, his mum had him over here out of wedlock. Out of wedlock. That phrase even is like so mental.
Fucking weird. But you say it and everyone's like, oh.
And actually, my parents are married. Not that I give a fuck. Like, but everyone assumed like
they weren't.
that they weren't.
Yeah.
Which is really
'Cause they
shocking
had
in
you.
Ireland at that time.
Or
Yeah,
because
because they were like, oh yeah, her parents aren't married. I was like,
Yeah.
well, actually, like not that it matters, but like
Yeah,
they are.
they are.
Like, but
Yeah.
so yeah, there was always the assumption I was born out of wedlock because like, oh Jesus, like the black child. That was there's already like loads of stigma like kind of going on there. But yeah, so Phil Lynott, his mum she stayed in England, but she sent him over to be like raised by his grandmother in Ireland, in Dublin, in Crumlin, actually close to where I grew up. And he's literally the only example, and obviously he's a very, very famous example. But he's the only example I can think of, like of that.
Older.
Yeah. And everyone else I know, and I know lots of these people, was in an institution. First of all, like if you were an Irish woman who had a child outside of marriage, even with a white person, even with an Irish person, like you couldn't really keep that child.
Yeah.
If you add on to that,
it
being like a black man.
Yeah.
Like it just.
I know. And I only learned that, like, because I always knew, I mean, my dad's behavior showed that he was unhappy, let's say. But he would always talk about being abandoned, as he called it. And it was always Patricia's fault, always, until we made the film. And until my granddad said, she came back for you. And then the woman that he was with at that time said no. And it was like, dude, because she did try to come back.
Yeah.
And I think the strength that she must have had to do that and then get turned away again is really like wild. In the context of what you're saying.
So young.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah,
like
really baby.
If she was 16 or 19,
like
that's so young.
Still so young. But I think that another question that I was thinking of was why. So my dad's name is Paul Theophane. You know, he's on Facebook. He's a black man. He's the only dude called Paul Theophane probably on Facebook. She could find him, basically. Her, not so much. Her name's Patricia Cahill. Cahill is a very, like, generic name, so I'm learning in Ireland, right? You said, yeah. And she's harder to find. She probably got married. Paul's has had the same name that she gave him, Paul Martin Theophane, from birth. So he's tried to find her, hasn't had any luck, but she, I presume, has not tried to find him, because if she did, she would have found him already. Yeah. And my question is to you, why do you think? I know you can't answer any of these questions, I'm so sorry. But as someone who just has had more of an experience, especially more of a black experience of that place, could you shed any light on like her decision making?
I can certainly, I can actually speculate.
Because that's what I mean.
Because I know, like I kind of know this, I know lots of
it's
people
not
who have
a rare
this,
story.
Who have this story.
Yeah.
And also I want to stress as well how many, it actually is a rare story. I think it's like, it's because of the nature of like kind of what I do and like, like that I know like lots of people who have a similar story, but it's still like a small like percentage of people, you know.
Yeah.
So I think really, even before we get to race, like which is a huge part of it, but I just even want to like cast the kind of scene like outside of that. And that I came across this statistic recently, and I need to, I think my friend told me actually, that I can't remember what age group it is, right? But it's a certain age group in Ireland of women, like maybe like my mother's age. My mum would be in her like late 60s. Something like 1 in 3 have had like secret babies.
Oh.
Okay. And that were secret, that were like taken away from them. And I have this was endemic in Ireland. Like it's kind of coming out. The extent of it is like kind of coming out now.
And is it because of Catholicism?
Yeah, it's because of Catholicism, and it's because of teenage girls getting pregnant, like either through rape or like consensual sex, and there being no capacity in the country for them to keep that baby. Like that is just absolutely like not permissible.
Just so, like economically.
Well, I mean, there would just be no social like support or like capacity for that to happen. So and the thing is, I knew that like I can't tell you how many people I know and how many people I'm related to who this is like who this happened to. And so, you know, pregnancy would be like kept secret often, and they'd go away and they'd have the baby like in somewhere like a Magdalene laundry, or some sort of like institution, and then the baby would be kept and like either adopted, or some of them were essentially some were being sold to America, like to be adopted, but to wealthy Americans. And some were actually essentially like indentured workers on farms. Like I met one woman who's been very active, who's had a son when she was a teenager. She's been very active in kind of bringing all this to light. When she finally did find her son, she found out he'd basically been like sold to a farmer, worked as a laborer, like on the farm. So the church was actually like, you know, running a business.
Running a little business. Many businesses.
Yeah, and this was really, really endemic. So this is like very common. And like I said, when you add the parents not only not being married, but it also being like a black father, there just wouldn't be scope for that. Why she hasn't? Okay, so because I know so many people who this is part of their narrative, I've come across like such a range of different responses. Some people whose mothers, or I actually know the mothers themselves, have found the children to varying degrees of success in terms of how their relationships have panned out. And then I know other people whose mothers have never attempted to find them. And I also know some mothers who've never, I know that they have children that they had to give up for that were taken away from them, and they've never tried to find them. And I've just seen such a different range of responses. And I have two children. I can't begin to imagine like what would happen to me like mentally if when I had them they were taken away from me,
and you had to forget about them, and then maybe even you had another family that you were allowed to be visible with. I just can't I can't predetermine how, like I kind of feel like I do know how I would respond, but like you also don't know, and also you don't know how traumatized the person and
is.
how indoctrinated into that institution. Like it's
and also maybe I feel I don't want to fuck up the person's life.
This is the thing, like I'm asking these questions through my dad, you know, like he doesn't know that he's not the only one. He genuinely has had his whole life thinking he's the only person who's ever gone through this, because he was in Peterborough, because he was not in Ireland, and because he wasn't even in London, you know.
But I think a lot of the people in Ireland, there's actually a group called Mixed Race Irish, and they are all, like, most of them are older people, and they were all brought up in homes. I'll connect you with them. They were all like you know, like given up by their mothers, and they were taking the Irish state to court because they were saying that not only did they kind of suffer the regular abuse in those institutions, but also because of the level of racism, like, you know, having their skin scrubbed,
being tested and all of that,
to like scrub like the dirt off them, and just like really, really like horrific abuse.
Whoa.
Well, I think a lot of people were abused in those places. But I think for the children that had black fathers as well, for the black children, there was an added
energy
layer
of
racism.
That's kind of crazy. Well, thank you for answering all of my questions, dude. So what did you think about the film when you were obviously having like your lens, and because you do know a lot of stuff, you're just a person that knows a lot of stuff, but has also experienced stuff that isn't necessarily like that far away, like in terms of like locality and stuff like that. Because I know you said that you had a lot of things to say about the film. What could you, I guess because what you're saying is that you have like lots of stories that you can relate to that specific story too. But in terms of like the way it was told, are you shocked? Are you just like, oh yeah, obviously that happened?
No, I didn't feel shocked.
No. Because I find that interesting, because a lot of people feel shocked. A lot of white people feel shocked at that story, you know. And I'm like, I'm not shocked either.
Yeah. No, maybe it's bad not to be shocked. Maybe
Yeah.
it would be nice to be shocked by something that's like actually so horrific.
I think it would be nice to be shocked. Yeah.
I just thought it was like, so it's like superbly made. Like it's just
Thank
like
you.
it's so beautifully made, and like stylistically, like there are just so many things. Like when your dad is dancing and it's like just completely silent.
Yeah.
And he actually he caught him like just looking so happy and like joyful. Like that's such a
Dude doesn't even know what a camera is.
scene.
He's like, he had no idea what was going on the whole time. And then when I showed him the film, he was like, oh, that was what you were doing. Okay.
And I think the way you filmed and interviewed like your granddad was like really really well done. And
I felt kind of that was difficult because the goal was to make sure no one got demonized within this story, because everyone has their fucking shit and everyone did the best. Literally, like I say at the end of the film, everyone that did their best.
Yeah.
Everybody did their best. Fuck Nancy, you know, obviously. But I presume she did her best.
Yeah.
She actually died during the making of the film.
Oh, Jesus.
She did, yeah.
And also, I was thinking, fuck Nancy, like,
Yeah, but, you know.
But I was also thinking, what's her life? What was her life? The other three sons, and then one of them, you know, stabbing his daughter.
Right?
I'm just like, what was her background? And like,
dude,
what had made her?
Well, what was everybody's? You know, you could go into, you know, my granddad, bless his fucking heart, coming here in 1958 from St. Lucia and not having anywhere to go and not being able to get housing. And so what did he do? He got with white people, and he had that proximity to whiteness so that he could have a roof over his head. And, you know, that meant that things were, he didn't have much agency in the situation. And I was like, you know, with what I'm saying about people not being demonized, I don't want him to ever be demonized for his decision making, because let's be honest, did he really have a decision to make in any of that? You know, could he have taken Paul by himself? No. He couldn't have been a single black father in London and have a roof over their head. He couldn't have done that. And then, you know, with Lulu, my auntie, who's the star of the show.
Oh my God, I love her.
Yeah. You know, she was born 10 months premature and only got diagnosed with cerebral palsy when she was 40. She's now 62.
Oh, wow.
And she's just the most incredible person in the whole world. And so, you know, I obviously already know these things, but then when I'm asking people questions, it's like dawning on me that I'm just making a film about my dad. And there's all of these other people who have their own amazing stories to tell. And I think that's what really the show is about. It's not about like a spotlight or a real like blowing up or dramatizing. That's not what it's about at all. It's just about a quietness. Like, it's like, you know, that this game that my brother-in-law keeps playing where you like get told a place on Google Maps and you just have to like see where it is and guess where it is. That's this show. It's like, it's like putting a pin in a little city, in a little cul-de-sac, and being like, what's going on here then? And that's what the film is about. And I think that we could blow it up it could be 1,000 shows, you know. But anyway, I don't know why I'm on a tangent now. But, you know, I was talking about Grandad, that was it. The way that I spoke to Grandad was, that's the first time I've ever actually really properly spoken to him.
Really?
We have been around each other a lot,
okay.
So, you know, like, but that was the first time we've sat down and had a conversation where I'm like a real dialogue, other than like, how are you and what are you up to, kind of thing.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I thought you were like a lot more.
Well, I think we are. I think that's the thing. I think that's what I gained. I gained so much from that process, because I was like, an affinity with I mean, like an elder, you know, a person who has, because of him, I am here, and I am of him in some kind of way.
Do you know what came? Oh my God! Like, I love that. Like, first of all, you were like a Do you have do people in England say you're the? I can never remember like what phrases are like what are English and what are Irish and like
Just
even what
say
are
what you
American.
want.
Like the spit of someone. Like
Yeah,
the
the
okay,
spit.
yeah.
I think that Irish has very similar dialect to like Scouse.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah,
Maggie's Scouse, Maggie's mum's Scouse, and I lived in Liverpool, so I'm like, yeah, I can understand you.
So
There's
like
also some other Scousers behind there, woo woo.
So you're like the spit of your dad. You're like a little carbon
Do you
copy.
think?
Like you look different, but you're also kind of like a carbon. I don't know. There's something like really similar as well. And then like you making the film, right? I really felt. So when I wrote Don't Touch My Hair, I started with this West African poem. I don't actually know what language it's from because I've only read it in English. I just know it's from West Africa. And it starts, it's like, it was not from my mouth. It came from the mouth of A, you gave it to B, you gave it to C, you gave it to D.
I remember that.
So that the mind be better in my mouth than in the mouth of my ancestors.
Yes, that's it.
And you like really like kind of embodied like that poem for me in the film. Like seeing like your granddad, no, actually okay, no, there's lots I want to say, but let me just try and like stick to some sort of chronology.
We can text
So your granddad and your dad and you, and I was just like, the way you have like you've created this beautiful like archive and like document of their lives, you know, people who stories that are often like not like document like that are not conveyed
it's
or portrayed
like you
in
go
this
Windrush, you get the story of them arriving, and then it's like, what happened?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like that work that you've done, like with those generations of your family, like it just felt really like ancestral and like really healing. And I also thought like your like clear like affection like with your parents, like you're so like so tactile and like huggy and like physical, which is like, I'll come to that in a second. I just thought that was so beautiful, and it really seemed in such contrast to what your dad's upbringing would have been.
Absolutely.
And I just thought that was so beautiful.
Yeah.
It had a really like lovely like circularity, and he's hugging you. He's like looks.
I mean,
really joyous.
that wasn't obviously that wasn't shot on purpose. Me hugging them after.
It felt organic.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it was set up.
Like, but they obviously knew that they were being interviewed, and then, you know, there was these moments of just like, you need a hug. This is what we do now. And I am like, oh my God, blessed and highly favored that I come from a family that's love language is touch. And my dad, especially my brother, sent me such a funny video the other day of him.
Is that your brother in the film with your dad?
Yeah, the one that looks like he's from Love Island, but he's not from Love Island.
I've never seen Love Island, so I don't know.
My brother in the back of a cab, and my dad's there, and my dad keeps really trying to like caress my brother's hand, and he just keeps like grabbing his hand and throwing it back, and it's like, even though like obviously there's that like little masculine energy that they've got going on, but I am very much, that is the way that I've been brought up, to be very tactile and very touchy, obviously with consent, people, but I was never going to put that in at the end, because that was so personal, actually. That was like the most personal. I'm not in the film, you know, at all. Obviously, it's my gaze, it's my lens, it's my camera, it's my positioning. You know, you can't get away from the fact that it's me. But then when I come in, and it reminds, I mean, I don't know, it's hard for me to talk about it because it's my fucking family, it's my mum and dad, do you know what I mean? Like, how much of a critical, like, conceptual lens can I have about my mum and dad, you know? But when I finished the film, let's say that, and Stephen knows that it was difficult for me to get there, I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'd never used that camera before, I'd never interviewed people before, I'd never done anything like that before. I can't
believe that's your first
I think I was lucky because it was like people that I was familiar with, but you know.
No, it's brilliant.
Like,
I watched so many
shit films. It took literally nearly 2 years from start to finish for me to understand what I was doing, and I only knew when I just put those clips in at the end, and I was like, okay. and seen, you know. Not seen, actually, because everyone keeps on going. The story isn't finished, which is the craziest part for me as an artist who literally makes work to like put a full stop to stuff, and like as you do with a book, you know, you have these feelings and then the final chapter comes and you're like, okay, I feel like some kind of release. Hopefully that's what we hope to gain from making the work, some kind of release. I don't feel any release from this work at all. I'm traumatized of God. But the love.
It felt quite healing.
It feels healing, but nothing has changed.
Yeah.
Nothing's changed, you know. But amazing to just have that experience with my family and love.
What's your dad and your granddad's relationship like now? Are they close now, or
on and off?
Yeah.
Day to day. Sometimes they will meet. Oh, your granddad. You know, that kind of energy. But it's a family. It's just a family. It's what everyone's like.
Yeah.
But yeah, sticky. And as you can tell in the film, that was the first time that they'd ever spoken about the abuse that Paul had experienced. But I think it's, you know, comes down to like black masculinity, and that's a whole nother fucking show. You know, I mean, actually Simeon's show. Go and see Simeon's show. Yeah, so I don't know. It's you see what you see, and I think that I realise that there's no reality to the actual story. There isn't. There's no reality to any story. I think that we tell the stories in a reality, but there isn't a reality to the stories because they just are. They're just a perception, like almost a made up thing. And I think that that's why I wanted to have that many angles, because I could have just interviewed my dad and just had him wax lyrical, but that would have been a very long film.
No, it was wonderful having like your aunt as well. I loved the stuff. And also having your mum in it was wicked as well.
She did not like that at all. Bless her. No, because she's just a gal about town, you know. None of them been interviewed before. None of them. Well, everyone was like, "Oh, this is just Rene. She's always been like, you know, this like little person colouring at the table, kind of same energy, you know, like, oh, what were you like as a kid? That kind of, you know, like, it's kind of that energy. And then when I brought my mum to see the show, she was like, what the hell have you done?
Was she happy with it?
Happy. She understood.
Okay.
I would say. And I would say the same for my dad. Understood why it was a story that needed to be said, but I would say unhappy with the fact that it was their story. Because as I said, it's not fucking finished, you know? Yeah.
How much longer do we have? Because I have another question, but I just have lost.
So I saw the exhibition about 2 weeks ago and I loved it so much.
Thank
I
you.
found it incredibly moving.
Thank you.
I loved the film, but I also wanted to ask about the room that you made with the carpet and the wall of the skinhead crucifixes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask, you know, what planted the seed in your head, you know, the vision of this room and, you know, any meaning behind it.
Well, I actually made a crucified skinhead in 2020 for a show that I had in Vitrine Gallery, and it was like made out of little clay that I did at like the dining room table, Maggie will remember, and like gold leafed it. And I was just trying to look at that symbol because I was like, what is this? And I think that anything that I do is always, what is this? And I don't have an answer, and then I need to figure it out. But I didn't know what it was until I put my dad's body into it, and actually like making his figure. There was lots of different kind of like phases of his life that I made a figure of. So there was one like with him with a little afro and he's like a teenager and all of that stuff. But then I decided that we should do him now because I've also looked like that in my life. Like I had a shaved head and I used to wear like, you know, Levi's and braces and Fred Perry. And I think that figure could stand in for, you know, a lot of different narratives, I would say, but mostly I was interested in this idea of the crucified skinhead. So for those who don't know, the crucified skinhead is like a long-standing symbol within the skinhead community. A lot of them have it like tattooed on their body, and they use it to kind of show that they are outside of society and that they are othered, which I kind of found quite humorous coming from white men. And I was like, no, you don't get to use this. I'm going to use this. Like, this is perfect. Actually, thank you. I am going to appropriate that for once. And it started with that. Like, it was quite humorous to me to take back. You know, not in necessarily like a really powerful way, but just as a tool that I could see an image also that wasn't like a digital image, that wasn't like a figure that was that had skin and that had like I don't know, material, whatever. But yeah, so then I decided to make that. Actually, my friend gave me this fucking ugly, massive like Jesus on a cross, and I was like, thank you. Which is really funny because they are like a queer, like Pakistani person, and they just had it in their flat, and I was like, oh, I love that. And they were like, oh yeah, do you like that? You can have it. That's my Scottish accent. And I was like, yes, please. And I had it in my studio, and I was like, kind of comparing it to this very two-dimensional crucified skinhead that is all we've seen. It's never been made into like a 3D thing. And then I realized while I was making it that this kind of thing, this kind of bodily move, I don't know what you call that. A what? A posture, yeah. This posture, when thought of in the context of a black person, not even a black man, was like strong. As soon as you put it on a cross, it's not. But the crucifix, you know, is really a symbol of, I think someone said something like, it's to hold the body as a symbol for life while that body is dead. And I think that in terms of blackness and black identity, and especially my dad's story, and especially in terms of, you know, even if we bring gender into it, even if we bring disability into it as well, you know, any kind of marginalized body is really a symbol of a body that is held up as a figure of death, actually, even if it is alive. And so you have this like dichotomy between when the figure is on the cross, which is, as you see, like there's 60 crosses, 60 years of my dad's life, there's 25 bronzes, 25 years of my life. When the figure is off the cross, it's really powerful. And when it's on, not powerful, because it's powerful in both ways. There's strength to it. And then when the cross is present, it loses all of that. And I think that thinking about my dad's mum and her relationship with Catholicism and, you know, all of this, it's complicated, and actually that's the only work in the show that I can't figure out. I can't. And that's okay. So I don't have an answer for you, really.
Perfect, thank you.
There's lots of shit going on there in here.
I wanted to ask you about that as well. I felt like you were really referencing like Catholicism and like the Sacred Heart. And like when I was growing up, like houses still had like, it was actually in my friend's house like a few weeks ago, and it was like his granny's house, and it still had like the Sacred Heart, you know, those real dark pictures of like Jesus, like being crucified.
Doesn't feel celebrative.
And the heart is like, the heart was sometimes a light, like they're real blurry childhood memories, but the red heart would be like, it'd be like a red light. And it was really like, it was actually like really gothic. Yeah. But they were all over like...
That's gay as hell.
It's not.
Sorry. I think that symbolism, which isn't one that I grew up with necessarily, obviously we all fucking grew up with it in some way or another, you know, but that symbolism I find just very interesting. And actually it was when Sarah came for a studio visit, I had started collecting crosses just to figure out what they were and how it felt to have them. And actually I was really just thinking about Patricia, my dad's mom, and when I first started making the show, she was the only audience member in my mind. I think that changed throughout, but in the beginning that was it. And Sarah came to my studio and was like, oh my God, it looks like my granny's living room. And I was like, this is perfect. Yes, good. And actually, Sarah, shout out to your granny who passed away during the making of the show, to give an ode to that kind of person, that collector, that person who has faith, regardless of what faith it is, in anything, which is why the carpet was in there, this kind of 60s carpet that goes between the church, the living room, and the pub, you know, let's not forget that we all have a little bit of faith in something. My dad chose the pub, his mum chose the church. I'm outside of both of them, but I'm the living room, you know. But I think that mostly I was just shocked by this symbol that everyone had some kind of relationship to in some way, even me, who wasn't brought up as a religious person, you know. But yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
Hello, I'm from Peterborough.
No. Bless you, sir.
And I know it very well.
You do?
And I'm a bit older than your dad, but only by 8 years.
Wow.
And
why the hell are you here?
I remember going to my secondary school, and the head boy, this was about 1960, 65, and the head boy was mixed race, black, and he was a very tall bloke. This was during the blues revival.
What secondary school did you go to?
That was Deacon's when he was a grammar.
Thomas Deakins.
Yeah.
Is that right? Yeah.
And he was a guitarist, and he was a blues guitarist. He's famous in Peterborough. And
What's his name?
he was called Lloyd Watson.
Okay, I'll ask my auntie Lulu, she'll know.
Yeah, she will know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at that time, it was the time of Ali Pele and Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
So the head boy was, black and a guitarist, and I thought it doesn't get any cooler than that. And that's what Peterborough was like, because like you say, it's quite a dull place.
Yeah. It was dull, but the people in it are not dull, actually. They're not.
Did people in Peterborough think that you were really cool?
Ooh, probably not. I think they probably thought that I was cooler than I was. But my dad, yes, and my mum, yes. So my mum, her last name is Auckland. They would call my mum and her sisters the Auckland girls. They ran this place called Deeping where they went to school. Do you know Deeping? Yeah. They were like the Auckland girls from Deeping. And then my dad, his nickname is Tio. Everybody knows him. Everybody knows him. So I don't know what's happened generationally. Maybe I'm just not as cool as my parents, but definitely there's an element of celebrity which I love that is local. It's a local celebrity thing that I think is really wonderful. If you've got a bit of style and a loud mouth, as my family do, you're a legend. I try and carry that.
It was always a big immigrant town, I remember.
Yeah, and still
a
is.
big Irish town.
Ah.
Go on.
Yeah, well, I was saying to these dudes earlier, there's a place, Millfield, 150 languages are spoken in Millfield. Wow. How big is Millfield? Not very big. It's between this, Queensgate and Warrington. It's a couple of roads. 150 languages are spoken there, and it's that's just sick. A lot of people in Peterborough would not say that it's sick, and that's what I grew up in. That, and then the people who didn't think it was cool. So, yeah, it's a little bit of an in between space, but I think it's necessary. So, thank you. And do you live in London now?
Yes, I live across the road.
Oh, cool, me too. We should go for a coffee, dude. Sick.
I was just thinking about Peterborough, and I wondered. I obviously know some stuff about the show, but I want you to speak about the photos you came across by Chris Porsche in Peterborough and how they've influenced your work, because I love hearing you talk about that. And then talk about class too.
Okay, I guess that's all kind of mixed into one, but Chris Porsche, fucking hell. I was 15, obviously Tumblr times, looking at all these punks on Tumblr, wanting to be a punk, thinking watching reading Tracy Emin and being oh my God, what the hell? And then I came across these pictures, and they were taken in Peterborough, and there were all these punks and these skinheads, but not also just punks and skinheads, just normal folks, like black and white pictures, some were in colour, but all just like in Peterborough. And then Chris Porsche, who's actually, I only just got in contact with him. This is what Peterborough's like. My granny's gardener is friends with Chris. Chris is actually a plumber, not a photographer. He takes photos. He is a photographer, but he's also a plumber. So he's my granny's, you know, anyway, whatever. However it works, that's Peterborough. But yeah, so I kind of came across these pictures when I was like 15, got into them, whatever. And then because he had taken pictures of the same people in the same places, like 30 or 40 years after. And it's really funny because you see like, obviously I was a 15-year-old trying to rebel, trying to stretch my ear, you know, my ear like thing, and like trying to do that, like while my mum didn't know, and trying to get like my septum piercing and dye my hair, and seeing like all of these punks, and then the pictures of them 30 years later where they're just like normal people, you know, people grow up, imagine that. And I was just obsessed with them. And then I kind of forgot about them, I guess. And then my granny, when I was like kind of started to work on the show, was it? Maybe just a bit before. She was like, oh, my gardener's plumber, a photographer. Look at his pictures. And I was like, oh my God, this dude. And when I came to them in my later life, that's when I think I realised about the thing that I said about Peterborough, like, how dare I? Because here everybody is, and they still are here. Like, not everybody leaves. You think everyone's on your team. You think everyone's leaving a place. And actually, no, they're not. They're happy. They're happy where they are, and how wonderful must that be to be happy where you are and to...
I fantasize about that.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. When I see my brother, I'm like, oh, how is it to own a house? Oh. You know? But yeah, how wonderful and how happy and how beautiful to be in the place that I thought when I was younger was a bit shit. Actually, it's got a lot more to it. And I think that those photos helped me because it has all of the elements that I love. It's photography, it's also punk, and it's subculture. Also fucking loads of subcultures in Peterborough, like, you know, and I think that small towns actually, you know, have a lot to what's the word? Have a lot to do with subculture because that's where they form. So yeah, I don't really know what to say, but Chris Porsche, I got SLG to sell the books in the bookshop, so please, because when I asked SLG to do that, I didn't know that they were going to do it, and then Chris messaged me on Facebook, and he was like, oh, those boxes were in my bathroom, taking up all of this room in my bathroom, those books, and I'm so grateful to you for having them shipped out. And I was like, so please do have a look at them, because I think it's important to have not such a London-centric idea of subculture, because I actually think that that's where the tea is.
And also not such a London-centric view of blackness.
Yes, please. Literally, and a lot of black people, I mean, there's not a lot of black people in Peterborough, actually. Quite similar energy to you. There was about 3 of us.
There's actually loads of black people in Dublin now.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Now I go home and like my brother moved to this, like he's kind of just on the outskirts of Peterborough, but we'll be walking down the street and I'll be like, oh my God, Zach, there's a black person, and he'll be like, I know, it's actually black people here, and I'm like, no, what the fuck? So it's like, you know, it's that, it's still there. That energy is still there, still like kind of excited, like watching the world change, essentially, you know. And I don't know if it's for good or bad. I hope that they're being treated properly, and I hope that they're enjoying their time in Peterborough more so than I did. Let's say that. But yeah.
Do you want to speak about class?
Oh, class is difficult. Do you find class difficult?
I mean, yeah, like...
I mean, that's a stupid question. Do you find class difficult? Yes.
I just find it such a determining feature of life, particularly in this country. And even though there's now like so much attention given, although often in a superficial and kind of lip servicey way, to other kind of intersections or types of marginalization.
Yeah.
I actually feel like class analysis is just kind of like entirely absent.
It doesn't work.
And race and class are often conflated.
Yeah.
You know, with the assumption that if you're black, then you're poor.
Yeah.
even though, like, and also the different, the different material conditions that different Black people came to this country under. It's very different coming as, it's very, there's just different material conditions. There's very different Black experiences in the UK, but all of that detail becomes obscured under, it's just Black people, and there's no kind of analysis of the different class backgrounds and what that means, the conditions under which you come to England, how they, if you're Black, if you're any race, but I'm speaking of Black people, the conditions under which you come here, how they determine the outcomes that you have here.
Yeah.
That just doesn't really, that, and also I am interested in and this is obviously like a theme in your work, but working class culture, and I'm not going to use the phrase white working class, but working class culture, and how in working class culture, the types of conviviality, as well as the tensions.
I don't know what that word means.
Sorry. Conviviality is kind of like affinities, not born of friendship, kind of a type of friendliness and affinity. Okay, so
familiarity.
It's kind of like, it means something like really specific. So I'm trying to but for instance, the relationship between your dad and the guy who's in the National Front, and then he's but he's one of the nicest
people that you'll ever meet.
There's a mad tension there, right?
Yeah.
So unpacking those kind of relationships, because the country's full of them.
Yeah. And the country's full of them, and my family is full of them. And I think actually most working class families.
Exactly.
Probably,
Yeah.
I think class is difficult for me in the same way that race is difficult for me, because I didn't know anything about it until I was out of the house, and I was like, and I guess maybe there was a kind of shielding, but not really. It was like a kind of a fucked up shielding, but then I entered the world and I was getting treated a type of way, and I still do get treated a type of way. And class, in terms of, if we're going to just talk about this show, it's a working class story, obviously, but there's energies that come from. It's difficult, like you say, it doesn't really work because there's privileges and there's nuances within class systems, and there's a white working class and a Black working class in this story, and they are not the same. And when they do come together, it does not fit. It's not harmonious. But that's why I love talking about skinheads, because that was a moment where it fit and it worked. And I think someone said something about the skinheads, that they shared the same assumptions about they had the same assumptions about their shared oppression. And I think that that's a moment of what we're saying, the assumptions of Black people being poor or whatever. There was a moment with the white working class and the Black. I mean, it's weird to say. I normally just say white working class British and Black people, West Indian people, because you assume that they are poor. They were poor at the same time, basically, and they were in the same buildings, and they were cast aside, not always in the same way, but into similar places, basically. And that's when the skinheads came, and that's where the skinhead was birthed, and that's I always try and search for some kind of hope, a window of opportunity, and I think that the skinheads were a window of opportunity that very quickly got shut down for, obvious reasons, because it worked. It was a threat, and it worked.
I always say that it's those kind of expressions of solidarity, or those brief moments of solidarity, that are truly that are actually subversive.
Yeah.
So people, I feel, and I think I used to probably. I've gone through kind of such a journey.
Yeah.
But segregation, or having silos, or types of kind of racial nationalism, are not subversive. The powers that be actually want people to be divided in those ways. It's actually solidarity that is the thing that's subversive.
Yeah.
Whenever there are moments of solidarity, or there are movements, look at Fred Hampton and the Rainbow Coalition, and then he's killed by the police at 21, because he's bringing together the Black Panthers, this white working class group, the Young Patriots, and then this Latino group, the Young Lords. That's like deeply,
Yeah,
they're all working
and it's
class.
about to
deeply
happen,
threatening.
and then it doesn't.
Yeah, so
And
people that were more like
that's history.
segregationists.
That is
they're kind of
actually the
allowed-
history of the British Empire, really. And I think that's why I am interested in mixed raceness, because to be in a body that represents that isn't dead yet, that is actually living, and in this room with this many people, and has that show with 4 rooms, like, that to me is the continuation of the skinhead movement, or those coalitions. And I think that, that's why I'm interested in mixed raceness as, I mean, it is just a dilution of whiteness, like sauce. It's also a dilution of blackness, but it's a something that was never supposed to fucking happen, basically. You know, and
I
think,
agree that it's something that was never supposed to happen, but I would disagree with the dilution of the two things.
You don't
but
think-
I feel like we don't have time to get into
I
it.
know.
Like, 'cause I can just see Sarah's like,
sorry, Sarah.
No, not at all. I just feel like
we will continue that.
it'll be continued in the pub, but I feel Skinheads is a really good place to end because it brings us back to the kind of the very beginnings of your work.
Yes.
So thank you so much to the speakers. It's been
Thank
really
you, Emma.
fascinating
Thank
and rich.
you. Thank you.
And thank you to the audience.